Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to do a video on the second movie in the Planet of the Apes series, which will be Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is a set that has all 5 movies. So, Beneath the Planet of the Apes came out about 55 years ago, just almost exactly. It came out in late May of 1970. This was a sequel to the original, which was a big hit for 20th Century Fox in 1968. And you could say this sequel was slightly rushed out a little bit, and I think that shows in the film. It was directed by Ted Post, and the script was written by Paul Dinn, and who had a good track record of a British screenwriter who'd written movies like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and a lot of great British films. So, and I think one thing too, when talking about this sequel, that this was really before a time where sequels were common. In the 1970s, we start to see sequels, The Godfather being the most famous example probably, but they were a relatively new thing in Hollywood, and not like today when you have trilogies that are mapped out beforehand, and you have huge story arcs that are already in place even before the first movie in a series is made. So sequels were made somewhat differently, definitely at this time in the early 1970s. So just a little bit briefly on what this movie is about. So we have the big twist ending at the end of the first one, and this movie starts out recounting that, where Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, discovers that he's actually been on Earth the whole time, and that he sees a Statue of Liberty that's clearly been destroyed in a war, and Taylor says, "We blew it up." So clearly he's referring to a nuclear conflict, which comes into play in this film as well. So I should say Charlton Heston did return for the sequel, but under protest, though, in some ways. Apparently Heston did not like doing sequels, and he really wasn't interested in returning to the character. He felt that the first movie was his story, and he didn't really want to go beyond that. So, but with some prodding from producers, Heston agreed to come back in a smaller role, that he would appear early in the film and appear later in the film as, I guess you'd say, an extended cameo, is what we would say these days, but gave all of his salary to charity. So Heston agreed to come back as Taylor, and when the movie starts out, we're with Taylor and Nova, who also reappeared. Nova's character also came back in this film, who was played by Linda Harrison as Nova, and her and Taylor are together. Taylor disappears into this kind of lightning or something, so Nova doesn't really know what's going on. And then another astronaut appears, a new character named Brent, who is played by James Franciscus, who is, I guess, the star of this movie. Franciscus was primarily known for his TV work, but he would also do a lot of work in film. Oddly, I've not seen a lot of his work in film. I think this movie might be the one he's known for the most, but he sort of looked like Charlton Heston a little bit, had the same look. But Brent is on a mission to find out, I guess, what happened with Taylor's mission in the first film, and he's the sole survivor of his crew, and he comes back, he meets Nova. In the first half of the movie, he figures out that he's on this ape planet and all that, and then we jump to a storyline with back to Cornelius and Zira, who are caught up in this militarism that's happening within their culture, with the General Urso Guerrillas wants to lead a military campaign into the Forbidden Zone, where he thinks humans are. He wants to get rid of all the humans in the Forbidden Zone, and he's a very militaristic general, played well by James Gregory, and says stuff like, apes, we know good and evil, humans don't, and he even throws out the line that has echoes in American history. The only good human is a dead human. So he's very militaristic, and there's also the sense that there's a bit of a religious fervor to this military campaign as well. Cornelius and Zira are opposed to it, as are most of the chimps. And there's even a scene of a protest of the chimps. So there is a little bit of commentary on the Vietnam War. This is 1970. So some social commentary on what's happening at the time. And then in the middle, getting into the middle, second half of the movie, where Brent, he comes upon like the abandoned subway. Like basically he stumbles upon the ruins of New York City, where he sees like the Radio City Music Hall, the New York City Public Library, landmarks like that, and an interesting set design. But eventually he stumbles upon a group of humans who are mutants, who are survivors of the nuclear war, and they are the descendants of survivors from the war, and interesting makeup. Their faces are all scarred up, and they're also very ritualistic, where they worship this nuclear bomb, which is a super weapon. It's kind of like a cult, where they have these rituals and strange music and all these types of things. And basically we're heading to the movie culminates with a confrontation between the apes and the mutants who are there. And this, I mentioned in the last video how nihilistic the early 70s was, and this movie has a very nihilistic ending, where we see Taylor again, who's been held prisoner, and he has a final confrontation with Dr. Zaius. And basically the movie ends where Taylor blows up the world. I mean, this is how the movie literally ends, with some very stark narration also at the end of the movie. So yeah, we really go for a big dark ending in this film, in this one. So not to spoil it, but it is a 55-year-old movie now. I should mention, this movie does have some issues. I think the biggest issues are with the script. I mentioned the movie was rushed a bit, and I think if you watch the movie, it just feels like not all the elements quite come together like they should. I did listen to the Moviefilm podcast, Zaki Hassan and Brian Hall's podcast, who do film commentary tracks, and they mentioned they were kind of really breaking down some of the script issues with this movie, where, for instance, when we're with Brent in the first half of the first part of the movie, it's kind of like a retread of the first movie, where he's discovering the apes and all that. So we're kind of, it's kind of a repeat of the first movie. And then the movie introduces the mutants, which feels a little bit random. We get a little bit with what's happening with the ape culture, but you just get the sense that the script needed a little bit of work, maybe a couple of more revisions to really flesh out the story. I know there were some other versions of the story also that were discarded in the lead up to this movie, but yeah, the script issues definitely show, and also this movie was hampered by a lower budget. The budget was cut in half. I think I read there was $10 million for the first movie, and this movie had a $5 million budget, and it shows. And unfortunately, each movie in this series would have a lower budget, so by the time you get to the last film, they're really working on a shoestring budget. But I think to the credit of the series, they still put out quality films, though, even though they kept cutting the budgets back and forth. Like, there's some bad rear projection in this film, and just the effects aren't quite there. We don't have a lot of the. There are some great shots. There are some good shots in this movies like that, but we just don't really have that epic scale that we had with the first film that Franklin J. Schaffner directed. So that's to the movie's detriment as well, which was just the budget being cut. I think one thing I liked about the movie is the music score by Leonard Rossman is actually not bad. It's almost it is going off the Goldsmith score, but this one almost has like a more mystical feel to it, and there's even some kind of like Moog synthesizer and some experimental music also in the score, I think, which kind of brings something to the movie. And I think if you watch this movie, if you kind of put your expectations aside a little bit and realize it's not going to be the first movie, it's not going to be quite as good as the first movie, but there is like this almost like a head trip, I've heard this movie described, where we have a lot of shifting tones, especially when we get to the mutants and all that. Like the movie does, and the fact that they're telepaths too, and they can kind of like control mind control and things like that. So there are these like new elements added in. So, and the movie's 90 minutes, just a little bit over 90 minutes. So I think if you just kind of go with it and realize, they were working under limitations and things like that. But like I said, there's interesting stuff throughout the movie. Some interesting themes of war, of a post-nuclear world, things like that. But I think the movie just needed to develop them a little bit more for it to definitely be on par with the first movie. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I would call it a kind of a curiosity. It's not like the first film, but if you're really into the series, it's worth watching, and there's some really interesting moments throughout this film. I'll put a link on this video to the commentary track I mentioned if you want to watch these films and maybe get a little bit more context. I'll put that on the post as well. So, okay, thanks for watching, and have a great day. Bye.